let's get down to business and discuss the do's and don'ts on Shabbat. Number 1. What is Shabbat? Shabbat is something that is mentioned within the Torah. The Torah is the first 5 books of Moshe, namely Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. These 5 books speak about Shabbat. It says it 12 times within the Torah, and it says that God created everything in 6 days, and on the 7th day He did not create. It also says in the Torah that we should remember the Sabbath as well as we should keep the Sabbath. This is the main principles of Shabbat. Number 2. When does Shabbat actually start and when does Shabbat finish? When the sun sets, Shabbat starts on a Friday evening, and Shabbat ends when these 3 stars appear again on Saturday night. The exact time depends on where you are living, and depending on the season. If it is winter, Shabbat will come in earlier, and when it is summer, Shabbat will come in later. You can find these times on Orthodox websites, or you can get a Zenamin app. I will put the description here at the bottom of the application that I use to calculate Shabbat times. Number 3. What work can we not do on Shabbat? This is the main question that everyone is asking. Now, the word work has been used in English. Most people know the 10 Commandments, where it says that you shall do no work, which is the 4th commandment talking about Shabbat. You will notice in the 2 sets of the 10 Commandments, the one says that you shall keep the Sabbath, and the other one says that you shall remember the Sabbath. The rabbis from these 2 sections of the 10 Commandments says that you should in fact do both. You shall keep it and you shall remember it. And the actual word in Hebrew is you shall do no malacha. Now malacha is translated as a work in English, but malacha actually appears in the building of the Mishkan, which is the temporary temple that the Israelites built when they were in the desert. The work relating to the building of the Mishkan is the 39 restrictions that we as Orthodox Jews cannot do on Shabbat. Violating any of these 39 restrictions carries a severe punishment. When the Sanhedrin stood in the first and second temple period, the penalty was death. Not good. The other severe punishment is, it says in the Torah, if you will violate or come to violate Shabbat, then you will be cut from the Jewish nation. Chas v'shalom. And we, as Orthodox Jews, do not want to do this. And thus, we refrain from doing any of these 39 restrictions. These 39 restrictions are also called the Av Malacha, meaning the father of the restrictions, meaning that these 39 restrictions are the restrictions of building of the Mishkan in the temporary temple that was built by the Israelites in the desert. Now, the rabbis then, in order to not let us sin, chas v'shalom, made a fence around the Torah, as we call it. This means that extra restrictions was put in by the rabbis so that we should never come to sin. Meaning that if you were to break one of the rabbi's restrictions, you will technically, by the Torah, still be fine. These restrictions or fencing of the Torah is to prevent you from actually breaking Shabbat and then having to deal with a severe punishment, which is death and being cut off from the Jewish nation. Chas v'shalom. Now, with that being said, let's go into the common do's and don'ts of Shabbat. Number 4. Electronics. We, as Orthodox Jews, are forbidden to use electronics on Shabbat. This means no phones or TVs. Why is this a restriction? Again, many people mistranslate the word work and they apply it to all Shabbat laws. As explained, it is not actually work that you can't do, but not malacha. Now, the malacha in electronics is building. The way we get to building is in anything electronic, there is a circuit. When you put something on, the circuit closes, and you have thus completed the cycle, and electricity can flow. If you turn it off, it opens back up. This is the malacha of building, as well as the malacha of the final hammer blow, or completing a project. This was the last thing that was done in the building of the Mishkan, and thus it is forbidden to do on Shabbat. Number 5. Lights. Now, lights is another restriction on malacha. This malacha is kindling a fire. The older lights, or the older light bulbs, had two things with a wire in between that got red hot, and the light in general got very, very warm. And the rabbis interpret this as as fire. Now, it says in the Torah explicitly that you shall not kindle a flame on Shabbat, and thus you can't turn lights on and off. These days, with LED lights that doesn't really get hot, or there's no noticeable fire, is no longer considered or fire. But similar to the electronics, it is considered building by opening and closing a circuit, or the final hammer blow, or completing a project. And thus, it is forbidden. The way that we Orthodox Jews handle this is either by using timers, meaning we set up the timers before Shabbat starts. Thus, we, during Shabbat, did not turn on any lights. We also didn't turn them off, but the timer did it independently. The other way it's done, or the way that I'm doing it, is you put on lights selectively and you just leave them all on for the entire Shabbat. I stay in quite a small flat. I leave the living room light on, the bathroom light, and the kitchen light. All other lights are off. I leave them on for the entirety of Shabbat. Number 6. Toilet paper. Now, toilet paper is something that shocked me in the beginning. Toilet paper is sold in a roll. Now, toilet paper is a certain length rolled up. You cannot break up things into different components on Shabbat. And this is the issue with toilet paper. Is number 1, tearing, which is a av malacha, a father malacha, that you cannot tear anything on Shabbat, which you would do with toilet paper. And you cannot put things into certain sizes that was already a certain size. Thus, 2 restrictions of tearing toilet paper on Shabbat. So, what do you do then? How do you go to the bathroom? The easiest way, and the way it is done by most Orthodox Jews, is you will see tissues next to the toilet. Instead of tearing the toilet paper, you will use these tissues to do your business. Number 7. The hotly debated driving. Driving is forbidden on Shabbat. Why is it forbidden? Driving is the malacha of lighting a fire or kindling a flame. This is one of the work restrictions or malacha that is explicitly mentioned within the Torah, and it says, you shall not kindle a flame on Shabbat. Now, when you put on your car and you turn the switch, the ignition goes on, which is a spark or flame, and thus it is forbidden. The other problem with just getting into the car is obviously unlocking the car, which is not actually a problem, but opening the door. Normally when you open the door of a car, the light goes on. The light at the top of the car, or the door lights, depending on the car you are driving. And as discussed, turning or turning off lights is forbidden on Shabbat. Number 8. Cooking. Cooking is forbidden on Shabbat. This is because you will be controlling a flame or electricity by your stove. If you have a gas stove, obviously it's a flame that goes up and down, meaning the flame goes higher or lower. You are thus basically kindling a fire by making it go up, or extinguishing by making it go lower. All these activities are forbidden on Shabbat. The same with a stove. Electronic stove, works with electricity. If you were to put it on a higher temperature, you would be using more electricity. If you're putting it on a lower heat setting, you will be using less electricity. And thus, cooking is forbidden on Shabbat. So how do we, Orthodox Jews, eat on Shabbat if we can't even cook? The way we get around it is we prepare all our food before Shabbat. Then we put this food on a hot tray and insulate it before Shabbat comes in. Now, when you want to eat, you just take this off the hot tray and you dish up and you have a lovely warm meal on Shabbat. Number 9. Grinding. Grinding was used in the Mishkan for preparing food, and thus grinding is forbidden. Now, the way grinding comes into play on Shabbat is normally with a salt or a pepper grinder. This is forbidden. The way you get past this is you get salt and pepper in a normal salt and pepper shaker. Thus, you can enjoy all the salt and pepper you like on Shabbat. Just don't grind it. Number 10. Writing. Writing is one of the 39 restrictions of Shabbat, and thus is forbidden. Writing was done in the building of the Mishkan, on the pillars of the Mishkan, and thus we cannot write. Many of the other fencing laws, especially in regarding money, is around the malacha of writing, because the rabbis was afraid that you will come to write. We will cover this later in this video. Killing. Now, killing is actually forbidden every day. But on Shabbat, killing even an insect like an annoying fly or mosquito is forbidden on Shabbat. This is because you are not allowed to shecht or to draw blood from an animal on Shabbat. In the Mishkan period, animals were slaughtered to eat and to use their hides for clothing and building of the Mishkan, and thus any bloodshed at all is forbidden. This means that you cannot even kill a fly or mosquito, and that fly or mosquito will have 1 day to live, from Friday night till Saturday night. After that, I will leave it up to you. Number 11. This is a very common encountered issue around Shabbat, and that is brushing teeth. Brushing teeth can cause your gums to bleed. Now, as we said in the previous malacha, you are not allowed to cause any bloodshed, not even a little bit of blood. Now, if your gums are prone to bleeding, best to see a dentist. If, however, you have brushed your teeth on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and no blood was shed, it's okay to brush your teeth. There is the side issue in polishing, as you are also forbidden to polish things on Shabbat. That is why you should ideally not use toothpaste, but rather a mouthwash to make sure that you do not have stinky breath. Number 12. Washing your hair, drying your hair, and combing your hair. All these restrictions or all these activities are forbidden. This is due to a few restrictions on Shabbat. The one is removing hair. Now, when you brush your hair, inevitably some hair will get dislodged from your hair. Thus, you cannot do it, as this is a restriction on Shabbat. This comes into play in the Mishkan when sheep were sheared. This is to prepare the wool for some things in the Mishkan, as well as to use the hides of the animals, and thus it is forbidden. The other issue with hair, washing hair, is that after you wash your hair, you would most likely, especially if you're a girl, come to squeeze the water out of your hair. Now, squeezing is forbidden because in the Mishkan, they would take fruit and step on it to get the juice of the fruit. This is the same as squeezing and is thus forbidden on Shabbat. Number 13. Makeup. Now, makeup is an issue because of the malacha of dyeing, changing something's color. This is a creative act that is forbidden on Shabbat. There is ways to do it or get around this by applying the makeup before Shabbat starts. My suggestion would be, is you all look beautiful without makeup anyway. So, going 1 day without makeup will not kill you. If, however, you want to enhance your beauty on Shabbat, you can most certainly apply the makeup before Shabbat. Number 14. Laundry. You cannot do any laundry on Shabbat. You yourself cannot do it, neither can you put it in a machine to do it for you. You cannot even put your laundry in a washing machine before Shabbat. as people might come to your home during Shabbat, hear the machine going, and think, chas v'shalom, that you are breaking Shabbat by laundering your clothes on the Sabbath. It is thus forbidden. Number 15. Trading. Trading has to do with money. Now, I'll cover Muktzeh in the next malacha, but trading is forbidden. The reason it is forbidden is, one, because of change of ownership. If I sell something to you, I am changing ownership from me to you, which is problematic. But the main problem is the rabbis feared that if you were to trade, you would inevitably come to write out a receipt. In those days, most trading was done by writing things down, and thus no business can be done on Shabbat. No business at all. You cannot go into work, you cannot discuss any business on Shabbat, because this is also a weekday activity, and thus it is not in the spirit of Shabbat. Number 16. Cutting. You are not allowed to cut anything on Shabbat into different sizes, or even to cut something open with a scissor. The main malacha of cutting has to do again with sheep shearing, as the sheep's wool were cut off by scissors in the old days, and thus it is forbidden. You're in fact not even allowed to touch a scissor due to this, and this will be covered in the next malacha of Muktzeh. Number 17. Muktzeh. Maybe you have heard this word before. There is actually 4 categories of Muktzeh, and maybe I will make a separate video about this, as this is quite a broad topic and it takes some studying to understand it. Basically, the law of Muktzeh is as such. You can touch any Muktzeh item, but you cannot come to move it. There is, however, a category of Muktzeh items that you can actually move for a Shabbos need, but you cannot move it if you want to protect its value. But not to overcomplicate things, basically Muktzeh works like this. There is things that you do in life that you use certain objects for. These objects could make you do one of the 39 restrictions. A good example is a pen. If you're gonna touch a pen, you might come to write. Thus a pen is Muktzeh and you cannot touch it. Touch it to move it, as we have discussed. The other item is a scissor. A scissor is normally used to cut hair or to cut something to a different size. This is forbidden on Shabbat, and thus you cannot touch a scissor or come to move a scissor, unless of course it is for a Shabbat need. The other Muktzeh item that is often discussed is money. You cannot touch money, as money is most of the time used to trade with, and trading is forbidden because you might come to write. Thus, this is Muktzeh. Now there's many such items and too many to discuss in such a short video, and thus I will make a video in the future about Muktzeh. Just know that there is some items that you shouldn't touch or move on Shabbat. Number 18. Carrying. Carrying is also a very complex subject, and thus I will not go into too great a detail about carrying. Basically, carrying outside of a public domain is forbidden. In many Jewish communities, there is a Eruv that gets put up, which means that the rabbi or the rabbis make a certain area a Eruv or a public domain, because you can carry anything inside a public domain, but you can't carry from one public domain to another public domain. I will give you a short example. In Sea Point, we have a Eruv or a big public domain. That means within Sea Point, I can carry anything on Shabbat. Previously, in 2012, when I started my conversion, I lived in Port Elizabeth, which is a very small Jewish community. There was no Eruv, which means that the rabbis there didn't make a big public domain in which I could carry. That means if I were to walk from my house, which is a public domain, to the shul, another public domain, I am not allowed to carry anything from my house to the shul and vice versa. This is probably one of the biggest problems in keeping Shabbat, carrying. I'll give you another example of how this was a big issue for me in Port Elizabeth. Number one, I stayed very far from the shul. Thus, walking was very problematic, as it was further than 2 kilometers. Now, there is a restriction within carrying or actually walking outside of a certain area of 1 to 2 kilometers. I'm putting it in here very simply. It's actually a lot more complicated than that. The second problem was a key. After you've locked your house, you cannot carry this key. You cannot even put this key in your pocket. Many people have a Shabbos belt, which is a belt that they put around their waist with a key being the main link. So the one piece of the belt goes this side and the other piece of the belt the other side. Thus the key is part of the belt, and thus you are not technically carrying the key. Again, carrying is a very big topic, and it's outside the scope of this video to discuss it in any further detail. Just keep in mind that if you are staying outside of a Eruv, carrying is a violation of Shabbat. Now that we have discussed some of the main restrictions that's commonly used today in Shabbat laws, let's focus on some of the do's of Shabbat. Let's continue our list. Number 19. Number 19 is kindling the Sabbath lights. But the Jewish convert, didn't you say that lighting a fire or making any light is forbidden on Shabbat? This is 100% correct. Well spotted. That is why you kindle the Sabbath flames just before Shabbat starts. This is the mitzvah within the Torah that says that you shall remember the Sabbath, Shachor, and you shall keep Shamor, Shabbat. This is mentioned in the 2 sections that deals with Shabbat in the 10 Commandments. Most Jews light 2 flames to commemorate this. One for Zachor, you shall remember the Sabbath, and the other one for Shamor, you shall keep the Sabbath. Many families also have the custom to teach their kids to light the flames, and thus each kid does the same or lights a single candle for Shabbat. Technically speaking, you can light as many candles as you like, as long as you don't put them in a place where they might go out by wind, like opening or closing a door, near a window where the wind may come in and blow it out. This is also forbidden. Number 20. Kiddush. Kiddush is made over a cup of wine. This is also remembering the Sabbath day, or as it states in the Torah, Zachor. Kiddush is normally done with a cup like this. I will later make a video of how Kiddush is done. Just know, for this video, that you should make Kiddush, especially the Friday night before your meal. Number 21. Eating bread. In Judaism, bread is considered a meal. Nothing else is considered a meal except bread. You should have 4 hamotzi, 2 full loaves of bread, or 2 mini loaves of bread. And you should make hamotzi on it, meaning that you should first ritually wash your hands and say the bracha al netilat yadayim, and then you should, without any interruption, go to the bread, say the bracha of hamotzi over the bread with some salt on your table. You can also sprinkle some of the salt on the bread itself and then eat it, after which you can talk. This is a mitzvah from the Torah, and it is also a remembrance of the manna that was given in double supply on a Friday for the Jews to collect so that they would have enough for the Sabbath. Number 22. Going to shul. If you stay within walking distance to your shul and you are sure that you are staying in an Eruv, meaning that you won't have issues with the laws of carrying, or if you know the laws of carrying and you are not going to carry, then you should definitely go to shul. Technically speaking, you could do everything at your house and you do not really need to go to a synagogue. But to experience Shabbat, especially if you are a convert or a potential convert, it is much better with the community. The reason I said that you must first make sure that you stay within an Eruv or that you are in walking distance to a shul is that you should not think, I want to go to shul. I want to hear words of Torah and have a spiritual experience, but at the same time, you're getting in your car, driving to a shul. This is forbidden. Driving is kindling a flame, as discussed, which is a severe sin within Judaism. And thus, if you stay further than walking distance to a shul, or you are outside of an Eruv and you have issues with carrying, you should rather not go to shul. I want to put this as a side point. If this applies, if you are already a Jew, or if you have already finished your conversion process. However, if you are in the process of converting, you should clarify this with your rabbi. I will use my case as an example. I kept almost everything of Shabbat. All the restrictions I kept except driving. So I drove to shul back and forth every Shabbat because I stayed more than 30 kilometers from my synagogue. This, number one, is tricky because you can't walk more than a kilometer or 2 outside of Eruv. There was no Eruv in that area, and it was just not practical. I then discussed this with my rabbi. My rabbi said, because I'm still in the process of converting and I'm still non-Jewish, I can actually do anything on Shabbat, but that I should make an effort to buy within the Jewish area or to rent, to stay within the Eruv and within walking distance to the synagogue, which I did. And a year before I actually finished my conversion, I stayed within the Jewish community and Baruch Hashem did not drive and kept the laws of Shabbat. Number 23. Studying. So what do you do on Shabbat? If you can't use any electronics, you can't do any weekday work, what should you do on Shabbat? What you should do on Shabbat is study. This is what I do on Shabbat. I go to shul, obviously, the Friday night, and then sometimes I host. Sometimes I join a family for Shabbat in my area. In the morning, there's a shul service. I made another video, the do's and don'ts in the synagogue, which discusses what happens in the synagogue on a Shabbat morning, which is quite lengthy. And then from after the service until Mincha, or the midday prayer of Shabbat, I study. I personally study the laws of Shabbat from the Mishnah Brura. But you can actually study anything relating to Judaism. And last but not least, number 24. Havdallah. Havdallah means that Shabbat is over. But because of the holiness of Shabbat and the sanctity of the day, we want to part with Shabbat in a good fashion and make a ritual of how we should end Shabbat. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it informative in navigating all these Shabbat laws. If there's anything that you would like me to discuss in more detail or make separate videos about, please write it below in the comments. Please subscribe to my channel for further videos on this and many more topics. I hope you all have a great week ahead. May you continue to be blessed in everything that you do. May we all merit to keep Shabbat and see Mashiach soon in our days. Shavua Tov.